Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, helping you prepare for the PMP exam. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the best time you'll ever have as you prepare for your PMP exam. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In this lesson, we'll provide an overview of project time management. The objective of time management is to manage the timely completion of the project. Because remember, our main objective usually on project is to remain within scope, budget, and to deliver it on time. Just imagine what your boss would say if you were the project manager of the 2018 Olympics and you missed your deadline by just 1 week. Well, you need time management to keep your project on track. And in this lesson, we are going to discuss what project time management is and why we do it. This is a very important knowledge area. We'll look at the importance of schedule management planning as well as different methods such as critical path and critical chain. We'll see the processes that are used to accomplish project time management, the interrelationships of cost and time, because these two are intertwined and you can't change one without affecting the other. Then there's a difference between the work breakdown structure and the schedule. Do you know what it is? Well, you will by the end of this lesson. And finally, we'll see that the project schedule is deeply integrated into all aspects of the project. We begin with a look at the activities of project time management. The official PMBOK definition is that project time management includes the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. This is accomplished by defining activities, which are then sequenced, given an approximate duration, assigned a resource, and that then results in a schedule that is executed over the project life cycle. Let's take a look at the processes that we have within the time management knowledge area. Project time management has 7 individual processes that you will use to manage the timely execution of your project. And, as in many other knowledge areas, the first process is a planning process. Plan, schedule, management. That's the process of establishing the policies, procedures, and documentation for planning, developing, managing, executing, and controlling the project schedule. Now that we know how we are going to manage our schedule and the time management processes in general, we can think about what it is that we're going to have to do in define activities. This is the process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. So what exactly are we going to have to do to deliver that swimming pool to our customer? These are the activities that we'll define here. Once we know what the activities are, we're going to sequence them. We're going to put them in order. First we need to dig a hole, then we need to put concrete in, etc. And that is the process of identifying and documenting relationships among project activities. So now we know what we're going to do and in which order we're going to do it. But who's going to do it? What do we need to use for all of these activities? And how long is it going to take us? Well, this is what the next 2 processes are all about. Estimate activity resources. That's the process of estimating the type of quantities and materials and human resources and equipment or supplies that are required to perform each activity. And then estimate activity durations. Here, that is the process of estimating the number of work periods needed to complete individual activities with estimated resources. Now that we know what we're going to do, in which order we're going to do it, who's going to do it, what materials we need, and how long it's approximately going to take, well, it's time to put everything into a schedule. And of course, that process is called develop schedule. The process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule. And you'll notice that everything that's in this definition refers back to the previous processes, the sequences. That was our third process, the durations, our fifth process, the resources, our fourth process, etc. So everything that we know so far about our activities that we've developed in the previous processes, we're going to use here to create, or rather develop, the schedule. Once we have a schedule, well, we all know things usually don't go according to plan. We have to make sure that we stay on track. Control schedule is our next and final process. This is the process of monitoring the status of project activities to update project progress and manage changes to the schedule baseline to achieve the plan. Okay, so we have these 7 processes. And where do you think these processes fall in regards to the process groups? I give you a tip. We don't have a single process in initiating, and we don't have a single process in executing or closing either. So these have to be in planning and monitoring and controlling. Well, the first one is easy, right? That is, of course, planning. Define activities. What activities are we going to have to do? We're still planning here. Okay. Now we know which activities we have. Let's put them in sequence. In which order are we going to execute them? Well, all right, we're still planning. Okay, now that we know in which order we're going to execute these, who's actually going to be working on this? Joe's going to work on this, Susan's going to work on that. Okay, we're still planning who's going to be doing things. How long's Joe going to probably take on his activities? How long is Susan going to? Well, we're still planning. Okay, let's put everything that we have so far into our scheduling software and see what kind of a schedule we're getting. And then let's play around with it and see if things are working out. Well, we're still planning here. Okay, now we have the schedule. Let's put the schedule into effect and actually work the plan and make sure that we never stray from the plan. Well, guess what? That is monitoring and controlling. Yes. 6 out of our 7 processes are indeed planning processes. From here we hand the activities off to other processes where they're actually implemented, where we work the plan. But controlling the schedule and making sure that we stay on track is part of project time management. Why is project time management important? Well, it is important because it provides us a schedule of all activities and tasks which we use to keep the project on schedule and accomplish other important tasks as well. Projects that are behind schedule are projects that are not providing maximum profit and maximum benefit to the company. If we don't manage our time properly, well, our deliverables are going to be late. If you had a project that was required to be delivered by a certain date and the deliverables were late, you run the risk of the project being a cost to your company instead of a source of profit. It provides us a framework for budgeting, resources, services, and so on. Time is money, and in this economy, project managers can ill afford to waste either one. Efficiency here is the key. Without control over our time, the project could run indefinitely. Ever been a part of a project that just didn't go anywhere, never seemed to end, and the deliverables, they never arrived? That is the exact situation we want to avoid, which is why we control our time and why that is so important. And it enables us to achieve the main objective, which is deliverables handed to the customer on time, within scope and within budget. If you achieve the plan on time and within budget, your project is a success. Let's take a closer look at the elements and processes of project time management. Plan schedule management. That is the process of establishing the policies, the groundwork, the procedures and documentation for planning, developing, managing, executing, and finally controlling the project schedule. This is your basis on which you're going to manage everything around time. The key benefit of this process is that it provides guidance and direction on how the project schedule will be managed throughout the project. It is very important that you do this process correctly, as everything else in this knowledge area depends on the definitions, the groundwork that you lay in this process. Your schedule is key to the project, and without a good one, you're going to be flying blind. Would you get on an airplane and fly to an unknown destination with a pilot that doesn't know where they are going beforehand, or how long it would take? The next steps in project time management are that you will define and sequence your activities. Define activities, that is where you'll be identifying and documenting the specific actions that are to be performed to produce the project deliverables. The key benefit of this process is to break down work packages into activities that provide a basis for estimating, scheduling, executing, monitoring, and then also controlling the project work. Sequence activities, that is where we identify and document relationships among the project activities. This process defines the logical sequence of work to obtain the greatest efficiency given all project constraints that we have. For example, if you are building a house, you would first need to lay the foundation and build the walls before you can start building the roof. As you are planning a project, it's necessary to estimate the resources required per activity as well as their duration. Estimate activity resources. That is where we will estimate the type and quantities of material and human resources, as well as the equipment or supplies that we are going to require to perform each activity. In this process, you identify the type and quantity and characteristics of resources, which allows more accurate cost and duration estimates. For instance, if you were building a house, you would need X number of contractors and Y amount of woods, etc. Estimate activity durations is where we estimate the number of work periods needed to complete individual activities with the estimated resources. The key benefit of this process is that it will provide the amount of time for each activity, how long it will take to complete, and collectively how long our project will take. Going with our home building example again, this process helps us determine how long it will take to lay the foundation, build the walls, and finish the complete house. The develop schedule process is where we will be analyzing activity sequences, reviewing durations and resource requirements, and taking into account schedule constraints. By entering schedule activities, durations, resources, resource availabilities, and logical relationships into our scheduling tool, a schedule model is produced with planned dates for completing project activities. And then we move on to controlling our schedule. This is where most of our time will be spent throughout the rest of the project. It's where updates to the project progress are kept, and we manage changes to the schedule baseline. This process provides the means to recognize deviation from the plan and take corrective and preventive action, and thus minimize risk to our project. If you can't keep your schedule under control, your deliverables will be late and you run the risk of project failure. The PMBOK guide has a very nice figure that explains how we actually create a project schedule, what we need, the components for it. Of course, the number one component that we need is project information. That is the circle, the big circle there on the right-hand side. This is basically your project-specific data. How long is each activity? Who's going to be working on the activity? When should the activity start? When should it finish? Who are the predecessors and the successors of each activity? On the other hand, we also need a scheduling method. For instance, we're going to say that on our project we're using the critical path method, or we're using the critical chain method to develop our schedule. All of this is input into a scheduling tool, whatever software you may be using. And usually in the software there's also a schedule model that shows your schedule maybe in different format. One schedule model could be a Gantt chart, the other one could be a high-level milestone model. At some point you're simply going to generate it and click maybe the print button, and out of your printer then comes your project schedule there at the center in the bottom. But how do I know which scheduling method to use, what scheduling tool we have, what the schedule model is that we're going to have to rely upon? Well, that is defined in the schedule management plan, an important output of time management. It is defined as a component of the project management plan that describes the criteria and the activities for developing, monitoring, and controlling the schedule. In other words, it is a plan to plan your schedule. The schedule management plan is where you choose and document an appropriate schedule method, scheduling tool, and schedule model to finally create your project schedule. So what is this schedule method that we keep talking about and that we define in the schedule management plan? Well, it is the method that defines the framework that is used in your scheduling tool to create the schedule model. There are different types of methods, and the two most common are the critical path method, which are the sequence of activities that define the shortest time to complete the project and the longest duration path through a network of tasks. If altered, the critical tasks will directly affect project duration. And then there is the critical chain method, which allows the project team to place buffers on any critical tasks on the critical path to account for limited resources and project uncertainties. We will look at each of these two in separate lessons to explain them to you in more detail. And then there is the schedule model, a somewhat obscure and esoteric concept that takes a moment to get your head wrapped around. Here is its definition. The schedule model is a representation of the plan for executing the project's activities, including durations, dependencies, and other planning information used to produce a project schedule along with other scheduling artifacts. Let me try this in my own words. A schedule model is a mock-up or representation of your schedule. For instance, some examples are a milestone schedule. That's a summary level schedule that identifies the major schedule milestones. You could have a schedule risk model that allows you to display risk factors directly in your schedule. Or even simpler, one model displays all your data from the schedule in red and the other displays it in green, so you can print the same data either in red or in green. I know, this is a silly example, but it gets the point across. The schedule models you use, they are templates of the type of schedule you want to create. And by applying that model to your schedule data, you can produce and print your project schedule. Simply in your scheduling tool, you say, show me the schedule as a Gantt chart. Show me the schedule as a milestone schedule. Show me the schedule in red. Show me the schedule in green, and then you can print that schedule model. Cost and time are closely associated with each other. The more time an activity takes, the more expensive your project becomes. If you have an activity that is scheduled to be completed in 2 weeks and you budget for 2 weeks, what will happen when the activity takes a month or longer? Well, your cost will go up. Certain resources are more efficient at completing activities than others. Bringing more senior and more expensive resources on the project can increase or decrease your cost. It all depends on the circumstances. In other words, the type of resources that are assigned to your project will define the time it takes to finish a task. And this duration not only defines our schedule, but it is also a major factor in cost. Cost estimating and time estimating are therefore very much interrelated. One cannot change without the other also changing. You won't be able to bring a resource on for 2 weeks and pay her only for 2 weeks of work, right? Here's an example of how interrelated cost estimating and time estimating are. The simplest way to explain this is if we talk about salary. Let's say your project takes 100 hours and you have one junior engineer at $50 per hour. Well, that's a simple calculation. The project cost will be $5,000. If your junior engineer, however, has to be replaced by a senior engineer who costs you $100 per hour, well, your cost has suddenly doubled, and it will cost you $10,000 to complete that particular part of the project. But what if, because this senior engineer is so good that he actually manages to finish the project in only 45 hours, well, then your project comes in at only $4,500. And this is what we mean when we say that cost estimating and time estimating are interrelated. And while we're talking about time management in general here, can you tell me what the main difference between the work breakdown structure, the WBS, and the schedule is? Do you know? Do you remember? Well, the answer is that the WBS, the work breakdown structure, shows its components in a hierarchical format. And the lowest level, at the very lowest point in the WBS, we have work packages. We don't talk about work at all, the activities, the tasks that need to be executed. That's what the schedule is for, because the schedule shows the activities that are needed to deliver the work packages in the form of a schedule on a timeline. And if you don't spend time on your schedule, your project will suffer. Costs and delays will both be high, and the risk of project failure will grow. So we've just seen that the schedule shows the activities needed to deliver the work packages, and without analyzing your activities to create the project schedule, you won't be able to monitor activities and update your progress. Without monitoring your project's progress, you'll be flying in the dark, so to speak. You won't be able to tell if you're on schedule or late, which is a big problem. Once you get the information from the monitoring activities, you can manage changes if necessary in order to keep your project within budget, time and scope, and you can achieve the plan that you have defined in the first process of project time management. Solid deliverables are the goal of any project, and if you develop and control your schedule correctly, you will have a successful project. Let's review. Schedule development and management are very important in project time management. Without a schedule, there is no way that your project is going to be completed on time. We talked about the critical path method and the critical chain method. As you recall, these were scheduling methods, and we'll go into further details here in our next lesson. We've covered cost and time estimating and why they are so important. Remember, cost and time are interrelated, they're intertwined, and each one affects the other. We spoke about the differences between the work breakdown structure and the schedule. The work breakdown structure shows work packages, or rather components, in a hierarchical format, and at its lowest level, that's where the work packages are. And what does the schedule do? Well, the schedule shows the activities that are needed to deliver these work packages. We also talked about the importance of activity estimates. Remember, estimates are not wild guesses. They are made with as much information as possible. Talk to your resources, your developers, and so on, and get their opinion before committing time estimates on paper, or rather in your scheduling tool. And finally, resource assignments. These could be the number of human resources needed for a project, senior resources, junior resources, or even the assignment of equipment and materials to your project. Here are some tasks that you may be required to do as you are preparing for the PMP exam or during the PMP exam itself. So suppose you were asked these tasks to perform these here, like create your schedule or your network diagram, or identify the critical path, or describe and determine critical chain. Well, most probably at your place of work, you're going to be using some scheduling software like Microsoft Project or Basecamp. And for the exam, however, you need to know how to do this yourself without software. You have to be able to do this using pen and paper. This means that you need to know how to calculate a forward pass and a backward pass. And no, this has nothing to do with rugby or football. This is a technique for scheduling. And we're going to take a look at that as well in separate lessons. So what type of questions do we see on the commercially available sample test? Well, interesting enough, even though most of us do use project management software on the exam, there is still a big need to understand how to manually draw a network diagram and do that forward pass and backward pass in order to determine the critical path. And you will have to understand the various types of scheduling diagrams and be able to explain when to use which. For instance, you should know that a milestones report is best used when communicating with senior management. And you should also know the various tools and techniques that the processes of time management employ, and know how to use them and what the concept is behind them. In other words, not memorization, but understanding why we use them at a certain point in our project. I've seen questions about the types of dependencies used on a project, like mandatory or discretionary dependencies, that we'll look at when we begin sequencing the tasks in our future lessons here. And of course, as always, there will be a lot of situational questions where you have to pick what the next step is that the project manager, that you should be doing. And this concludes our overview of project time management. But before we go, here is a quick exam tip for you, all targeted at making sure that you keep taking the next steps. So, have you signed up for the exam yet? If you have not yet signed up, then you should do so as soon as you meet all the qualification requirements that PMI has defined. Why? Because so that you set yourself a target. There is really no greater motivator to study for your PMP exam if you know that, well, I only have 3 weeks left until I have to sit down and take the real test. So put a little pressure on yourself and sign up for your exam. And with that, we have come to the end of this lesson. So it's time for Justine to say,
Bon voyage.
And of course I say, until next time.